to America had this to say about the psyche of the Midwest. In the Middle West, you meet the people I consider the most stable in America. I mean the most psychologically best balanced. I thought that was a real compliment. I hope you think so too. It's certainly my Midwestern upbringing that I credit with keeping me grounded and centered in what really matters in the fast-changing world of modern-day media. Unless you happen to be at ground zero during 9/11 or in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina, or more recently at Sandy Hook Elementary during the horrific shootings of that school's smallest students, or at more awe-inspiring events like the inauguration of the first black president of America, or at Tahrir Square in Cairo with the demonstrators demonstrating for freedom and democracy. Most of the events that we experience today are filtered through the omnipresent media. The media is a collective lens for viewing current events, and its power to determine what we know, what we don't know, and how we see things in fact is just as big an event in history as any crisis or war the media itself covers. As James Hillman said to me, journalism is now itself a 24-hour story. Only think that at this nation's founding, it took 3 or 4 months for treaties being negotiated with France and England and Holland to even reach the shores of America to learn the outcome of these treaties. I think that's a concept that our modern minds now can't even grasp. So it's stating the obvious when I say that we live now in a world saturated in a steady stream of news, like a kind of electronic ocean that pulses around us, bathing and overstimulating our psyches in waves of information. Email, Facebook, Twitter, smartphones, iPads, computers, and of course old media like radio and TV. Ensure that when a major political crisis or a natural disaster occurs, whole populations of people at great physical distance will enter a virtual emergency zone almost as immediately as the participants themselves. Rarely lingering on any one topic for long, however, the media cycle flows on very quickly. Jungian analyst Tom Singer says that the media today has a kind of manic, devouring quality to it, an insatiability. He said that media today seems to need some kind of huge event, like the death of a Princess Diana, or a Casey Anthony, or a Jodi Arias murder trial, every 6 to 8 weeks. Some big thing, he says, that we're all going to digest simultaneously to keep us satisfied, and the more tragic and sensational the news, the better. I certainly don't mean to sound like a Luddite who is against technology, because truth be told, I'm a real news junkie myself, and I must be a Washingtonian by now because I love following the blood sport of politics. I also appreciate the miracle of connection with the wider world I'm able to have, the research I can do without leaving my house. As stressful as it is, I like knowing when my fellow humans are suffering, even if I can't do more than send a donation or say a prayer. And one of the greatest benefits of social media like Facebook or Twitter are its positive uses in repressive societies, for the information it provides, for the power it can give to the powerless, and the voice it can give to the voiceless. But if modern-day media makes each of us witnesses to history, how are we to handle this new power? What are we to make of the constant drip of information into our overloaded psyches, already dealing with the crises and problems of our lives? And what are we to do about the psychological danger modern-day media presents in the way it flirts with our emotional selves, the way it leaves us like a kind of fickle lover standing at the altar with no follow-through or commitment to the deeper dimensions of the overwhelmed by the flood of news, we sometimes dissociate, our feelings shut down, dulling our capacity to integrate and assimilate events. A tsunami then becomes just another tsunami, a revolution, just one more revolution. After the recent Sandy Hook shooting, my son came to me and he was really concerned, and he said, "Mom, I don't feel the kind of level of horror I know I'm supposed to be feeling." And he realized that there was a kind of numbness that had set into him from watching these kind of recurring events. Conversely, an event might trigger such strong reactions that we become overwhelmed by anger and rage, or even sadness and depression. These are really big questions and issues, and even in addressing them, I know I can't answer them, and that humanity is in a process of integrating this enormous new development that may take centuries to really fully understand. But from my own work over the past decade, examining the underlying narratives that act as unconscious drivers and shapers of the American psyche, one thing I do believe is that some of the principles of psychology, and even more specifically, Jungian perspectives, that draw on myth and symbolism can be valuable guides in helping to orient us in a modern-day world of new media. The link between the surface events of everyday life and the deeper realms of meaning and myth was addressed very movingly by Jung in his private journal, The Red Book, a Dante-esque compilation of the dreams and reveries streaming through Jung's psyche that he wrote down and painted, and that, as most of you probably here know, was just published in 2009. At the time Jung began this remarkable work in 1913, he'd reached a critical juncture in his profession as a world-renowned psychiatrist. The pressure of a public split with Freud over their theoretical differences had thrown him into a profound state of inner chaos, and he'd been flooded with unsettling visions and voices. In addition, Jung was troubled by horrific waking visions of Europe devastated by catastrophic floods and rivers that ran with blood. While continuing to see his patients and maintain his family responsibilities and military duties, he courageously began his own investigation into his psyche. As it happened, Jung's personal crisis coincided with a critical moment historically. And when World War I broke out, Jung realized that his apocalyptic visions had not only been about him personally, but also about Europe. But Jung didn't just leave it at that, didn't just think he'd been psychic. In studying his fantasies, he realized he'd stumbled upon the myth-making function of the mind, that he had discovered the existence of another dimension of consciousness underlying physical reality. The collective unconscious, that fabulous compendium of all the world's treasure of myths and archetypes, narrative patterns, gods and goddesses, and religious symbols and images, was Jung's great contribution. But of further interest to our discussion today, Jung also writes compellingly in the opening paragraphs of the Red Book of how he came to the realization that his life until that point had been about serving the spirit of the time. Yet in addition to the spirit of the time, Jung realized, there also existed a spirit of the depths which led to the things of the soul. Rather than favor one approach over the other, Jung saw his task as reconciling the spirit of the time of pragmatism, use, value, and science with the spirit of the depths, or the things of the soul. The spirit of the times, by the way, this attitude that is so pragmatic and practical, is a very American attitude. Aside from the profound message Jung's revelation has for individuals, I can't think of a more apt orientation for modern-day media to adopt. Not necessarily to give up its coverage of the spirit of the times, but to find a way to dive beneath current events to the spirit of the depths. what I try to do with my own writing. And over the course of this lecture, I'll be exploring 4 myths: the myth of Hermes, the myth of Icarus, the myth of the wasteland from the Grail legend, and the American myth of the individual, and how each of these myths might deepen our knowledge of certain political events. In taking on 4 archetypal myths and perspectives in one lecture, I realize I have been a little overly ambitious and maybe even contaminated by the kind of shallow media approach I'm trying to counteract. So I hope I have enough time, and I hope you'll bear with me if I go a little bit over. So the first place I want to begin is with media itself. Can something as shallow and seemingly fleeting as media have a soul? Is there even such a thing as a god for the media? According to the ancient Greeks, there was a god for every aspect of life, or a goddess. There was Mars for war, and Aphrodite for love. Invisible to the naked eye, yet powerfully present, these old myths map the dark and light of human nature. Psychologically, the myths, gods and goddesses in our time have become the complexes and passions, conflicts and neuroses of our human psyche. So when it comes to the area of life that has to do with the exchange of ideas and communication, of getting from one place to another, whether that be traveling from DC to Kansas City, sending a tweet or an email, negotiating a business deal, delivering the ideas in this lecture, writing about them for the Huffington Post, the Greeks indeed had a god, and his name was Hermes. Mercury was the Roman god name given to a god whose origins date back to Babylonia, where he was known as Nebo, the god of writing. Through the medium of Greek myth and literature, Hermes emerges as a complex character who played a wide range of contrasting roles. Poetically gifted, he was a silver-tongued ancient god of communications, an ambiguous figure who could be by turn charming and deceitful, duplicitous and knowledgeable, clever and sincere, part-guiding angel and part trickster. So how like the media does that sound? According to the Homeric hymns, Hermes was born the illegitimate son of the nymph Maya and the god Zeus. A precocious infant, his first act was to rustle his half-brother Apollo's cattle. He then crafted a magic pair of winged sandals to cover over his tracks. Still, Apollo found out about this theft, but after sweet-talking his angry brother into reconciling with him, Apollo bestowed on his little brother Hermes a staff, a golden caduceus, entwined with 2 serpents that symbolized his divinatory powers as a god, as well as his ability to harmonize 2 opposing points of view. Because of his speed, his ability to be everywhere at once, Hermes also became the god of wayfarers, adventurers, travelers, and the open road. And all throughout the ancient Greco-Roman world, stone pillars called herms marked the highways. As the guide of wayfarers, whose shrine was placed at the intersection of highways, Hermes came to be seen as a god who rules all forms of transition. Lord of the road, he was god of thresholds, boundaries, doors, and entries. Hermes is thus the patron of those caught in an in-between transition, a place of liminality. Thus Hermes was also the guardian of the borderland of dreams,